So if you're in the apprenticeship program, you can get voucher. Oh, there you are. I'll change your turn. Um, so if you look at the website, and this is version 3, so if you want to attempt that, we have voucher for apprenticeship students, and then be able to think about your objectives. So if you want to pursue it, I would recommend Pentest Plus is a little bit less vendor specific. It's neutral. It's offered by CompTIA, similar to A Plus, and so on, right? But the length of the test is typically longer than your normal exam. Other certification is 90 minutes, 90 questions. This one is a little bit more advanced, so it's longer, and you will have more practical based questions. Um, and if you are buying preparation content, just look at your series for the exam. And then you need to answer, 90 questions. So you need to pass with a percentage, and you can take it, remotely, or you can go to a site to schedule it. So, in my opinion, this is more of an affordable neutral base. Let's say that you want to kind of start in this area. This is probably the beginning certification that you can acquire. If you want to do purple team or red team, I highly recommend getting OffSec. A lot of the pen tester that are, doing more red team, purple team base. But as you can see, if you go with a lot of the vendor specific, they are pricey. So if you work for an organization, if they want to kind of build your path for this type of career, if you're an analyst and you want to transition to a specialized pen tester, perhaps they will be able to help you get training and paid for this. Just keep in mind that Kali Linux is the tool, right? That's why a lot of my students are like, why are you always using Kali Linux? Because it is the base for pen testing, right? So if you're comfortable with Kali Linux, I know I'm only touching on certain tools, but you have access to it. So I would encourage you to do that if you wanted to pursue this. Um, and pen tester, they do have really great salary, and there's a lot of perks behind it, but also a lot of pressure with, and patience and all of those components. Another one that you can get into, and this is a label of the class. So traditionally, CEH is the certification to get. If you look at the price, it is expensive, just like the other one, right? I remember long ago it was under $1,000, and now they're all hitting about $1,000 for the highly demanded ones. And EC Console does have a package for you to train. They have an associate level, so if you don't want to go for the typical ethical hacking certification, you can go for other level like the associate level, which is a little bit less, and it requires less technical skills and knowledge, so you can pursue that area. But they do have variations in all different paths. So you can find their information for cybersecurity certifications under EC Console. Very popular product, highly accepted in the industry. But like I said, right, it is becoming more of a pricing point, especially if you're starting in the field. So if you look at now, they have the AI component, and then they also have pen testing for professionals. So they break it down into different area. And then if you're management, they also have like an area for CISO and other things. And the list goes on, right? So there's so many options. You have to kind of think about like what you want to pursue in career, and that's really, the investment behind it is the emphasis in your expertise, right? Certification is really about the focus in what you are going to be pursuing or you currently pursuing, and then your academic, degrees and certificates really speaks to the foundational knowledge that you have. So, um, think about that and then think about the direction you want to get into, right? So I want to just share that resource. So today we are going to use Kali. There's some tools that already been equipped with Kali, so I want to introduce you to some options. And I said before, you can also look at GoFish and do some practice with that. And so once you download Kali, or you can use the version that you previously downloaded from last week if it's still there. I just re-extracted mine only because I reconfigured Kali for my other classes and I didn't want to like having to go back and undo the configuration. So I just re-extracted. I deleted the old folder and then I re-extracted it. So after you have downloaded and extracted, and again, right click the downloaded file, go to show more options, 7-zip, and extract files. And typically this is the same process for newer version and also the older version. We want to use the current one, not the weekly one. So once you have it extracted, you can call up the app by, if you have it installed in your system, which we do at school, you open up your Oracle VirtualBox, and then if it's not loaded to your playlist or your library here, right, you can click add, and then navigate to your downloads, open up the extracted folder, its subfolder, and then click on the blue file, which I have. Now, if you double click, it just loads it and sometime it would launch it. I recommend changing the setting before you start it, right? If you started it, it's fine. It's just gonna be default to 2 gig, which is 2,000 megabyte approximately, and 2 core for the processor. But if you haven't started it like I did, you can go to the settings and then you can change your RAM to 8,000 or whichever that you would have enough to accommodate for from your physical system. And then the processor, I changed that to 4 core. Once you're happy with your setting, you click OK and then click Start, right? Now, if you started it and you want to change, you have to shut it down, change, and then reboot. It's a quick process. And then let me know if you have questions throughout. It's okay if you're not in the same pace, right? Um, but what I wanted is I kind of wanted to do a demo so you can go back and watch the video or follow along. And then if you're ahead, you can work ahead. If you want to catch up, if you have questions, let me know. So as usual, after we boot, we're gonna log in, right? Your credential by default is KALI for username and KALI for password. We're gonna start with one product known as the Fish Mailer, and it gives you the general description. I just pulled this from their website. And so this is a way that is we can craft like a phishing campaign that we can use to assess our people performance level or knowledge and be able to um create some kind of awareness program or training program based on what we have obtained, right? I told you the story about Colton School District where my apprenticeship students design, and so they use the phishing campaign to determine how many users actually click on the phishing link, right? And then they'll be able to build out the education platform for school district. So Fishmailer is going to have your major social media platform that people typically access, and it changes over time. They do update the app, and so it's approximately 20 plus type of known products that people use. Okay, so I'm gonna log in here. And let's click this close so we have more workspace. So after we have logged in, you always start your Linux machine with updates, right? For Kali, We do that so that way when we install software, we don't run into problem. So we would do sudo apt update, and you can copy and paste the command or type it. And then if it asks for credentials, just type in your password for your account. And so once you have the completed updates, we are going to download, right, our software or our tool from Git repository. A lot of these developers, they release it in Git. I've had students ask questions when they do my Python class and they write a keylogger and they ask me if it's okay to put it on GitHub. Yeah, lots of security professional or developers put security software. That's how you can distribute it to other people who use it. That's how we find open source, right? So you are going to use Git, and Git command is equipped with Kali. Not all Linux, most Linux releases have it, but not all operating systems support Git, right? So we want to use Git, and you can also use wget to download. But Git is going to allow us to copy the application folder to our default home directory for the account. So after the update, I'm going to clone the application or download the code. Let me put this up a little bit. And it's going to quickly pull that down if it's not blocked. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into the folder. Now, if you're receiving an error because maybe you didn't have a complete download, then you need to check, right? I'm going to show you real quick. You can always do ls to look at the home directory content. So if you download it, you should see it there, Fishmailer. Okay? Now, you don't have to check if you know that it's successful. It's going to place that directory, that folder that contain your source code there. Okay. Now, this program is created or written in Python. So we are going to use Python to run the program as it is a .py. So whenever that you see a .py, that's a Python file, and we need Python to execute the Python file, right? Um, can they package this to be in, some kind of executable file in Linux? Sure, right? But sometimes that's not the case because we actually just pull the folder that has the source code in Python and we're going to use it. So sometimes you see that in a lot of tools. So what we're going to do is we are going to move into this directory. And you can always check, right? In the future, if you redo this and if the name of the tool changed, like instead of fishmailer.py, they might rename it something else. You can always ls to see if it's the same name so you can use the proper command. So we move into the folder or the directory and you see that in your path here. So it's important to pay attention to what you see in terminal, right? Just don't go through the process and not look at it. And then once you do that, okay, you are going to execute the application using Python command. Okay. So how do I know, right? You can read the documentation. Like I said, you can do ls, and you see that this is a Python file that we're going to run, right? So in terminal for Linux, you just use Python 3. It's already been installed, right? Typically for a current version that is gonna be adaptable to your operating system environment. And so we are going to use Python 3, and sometime you would need to use a -n, but we're gonna run that in Python now. So it's going to go through and check the updates for the requirements. This is the interface, right? Console base for your application. Sometimes they would have a UI or a graphical user interface where you can click. In this case, it's only going to be like input through your keyboard. So it's letting you access the application at the root level, as you can see, because we need to modify some template. And these are the templates of the providers that they talked about in the description. This list changes over time. So in the future, if you come back, some stuff might get dropped off, right? And they might add something new depending on the trend that the developer feels like that could be used. So these are pre-made templates for different, um, I guess, products, software, web application, and so on that people would access on social media. So what we're gonna do is once you run it, you got to this interface option. You are going to take a screenshot here for the application menu. And what you're gonna do is it tells you where it's gonna save your template. You see right here? That's the file path. So in the case where you need to find it, you would see it. It says your templates will be saved here at this location. So I can go into the home directory in Kali, which is default, and you can click on the home like this, right? And then open the fishmailer folder or directory. And under that, you should see template name.html. So if you name your template a certain way, right? If it's customized, you would look for that name. And so we know where it's located, and that will be your answer for 13B. You need to record this path. The reason why I have you write that down so that way, in case you look for it, you know where. And you can always CD in terminal, open another terminal and CD into it and see it. So we are going to use PayPal. So option 12. Now, if you want to try other products, you can, like Twitter, which is now X, right? It's a little dated there. Um, or other things like Steam. So they have an inlay of the graphical user interface in the template with the HTML code, so that way you don't have to start from scratch. But you know that tech company, also companies that offer these products change, right? So sometimes you might have to make some tweaks in the HTML code to make it look close to the real thing, right? So, but the template is there for you to start. So we're gonna go here, and then what you're gonna do is you are gonna enter the number 1, 2, so 12. That's the option that we select, which is PayPal. And then what we're going to do is we are going to then put in the URL. Now I have you put this in, okay? So in the real practice, you are going to have to register for a domain with something that's close to the template that you're using. So like PayPal, the law, account, something like that. But not PayPal itself, because they already registered. You cannot use their domain, right? So we want to make it look kind of close to what the real thing is without making it too obvious to the user, right? That's the pretext component of this. So we want to have the URL placed into the template. Why? Because when the user click that button, it's going to take them to our registered domain, right? I didn't register for this domain, but in the real practice, you would. And the process for that sometimes is minimal. It could be $2 a month, right? You can set it up using a prepaid credit card. So for a real criminal, that's what they would typically do, or they would have a server somewhere that's harder to locate, and they would host this particular domain. Okay, so once you type that in, you are going to press Enter key for step 15. And what that does is going to plug it into the template that you're using. And it's going to present you with two options, right? Do you want the app to automatically generate an IP address for it? Or do you want to have your own custom IP? And this is important. So when you register for a domain, you would contact a vendor, right? Any cloud company that hosts domain. You say, I want to register this domain, and they're going to give you a public IP address. So if I pick option one, I'm going to have that public IP address entered, right? If I don't have an IP address for my registered domain, I would pick option two. So right now we're going to pick option two because we didn't go out and get a public IP address for our domain. So two, and then press enter. And it tells you here are the options, right? You can get these IP addresses in different region because um, ASIN, as you know, if you these companies that give you public IP address to host, they are given a list of addresses to use by the region, right? The continent that they exist in, and also regions. Sometimes North America compared to Latin America, etc. So you pick your audience country, okay? If I'm targeting a company in United States, then it should be USA because it's believable, right? So it will be relevant to, where you want your server to really look to be seen as. And then also like they have different areas, so we would then select. So we are gonna pick this one because that's USA, right? So you're gonna type in 5. So look at your option. If it changes, just make sure you select the appropriate country. And then we are going to name our file. So I typically name it to something that I want to obtain my objective, right? That will be relevant. So we're gonna do PayPal login. You can name it anything you want. PayPal credential, PayPal itself, right? And if you use Netflix or others, right, just the relevant name that will be important. Now, it automatically fills out the file extension for you, so you don't have to put in the file extension because it's going to be HTML, like what I put here. It's a template. Basically, it's code for the email content that would look like a website. So it's going to be PayPal login. And then you want to store whatever that the credential the user input into a file. Now, in a large mass type of phishing campaign, you want to put it into some kind of database or server because you might have thousands of users that it's going to enter that information. So when you work with a large enterprise, think about how you store the data. Can you store 1,000 credential on a text file? You can. You just need to read it eventually, right? We don't want to just like read it through the terminal. So if you have it on like a CSV file, that's probably easier to parse, doing for analytics and so on, right? So we're gonna, after we type in the name of our HTML file, we're gonna type in the name of our text file that's gonna store the data that's entered by the user. So we're gonna say PayPal credentials, and it's gonna do a .txt for you, so you don't need to put in the file extension there. Any question? So once we type in the name, we just press enter and it tells you the status. It created the HTML and it created the text. So those of you who took Python classes already, you already know how the program generate text file and other files, right? So it's easy. So writing this program is not that hard either. You have modules for different components and then output files after recording the input. So we're here at step 19. we, if you want to check, I always check, right? You can do ls to see if the file's created, and you should see the HTML file that you named, and the credential, right? It does come with like password.txt and permission.txt. Those are some pre-made file that came with the application. So if you want to know the content, you can use cat command for those files. Or you just open it up and look, right? And so there's some additional files that came with the application. So once you ls, you would see your files, your files here, right? And then the .txt. So take a screenshot there. I'm sorry, you don't need to take a screenshot there. We're going to open up the HTML file. So I don't think it's on the desktop. I probably have a misinstruction there. But since it's here, right, if you want to access it, an easiest way is to go to home folder. Okay. Double click that. And then go to Fishmailer folder or directory. Open, double click that. And it tells you to open the HTML file that you just made, right? Which is PayPal login.html. And you should see the logo with the globe. Double click that. And by default, your browser should take that file and load the HTML code. It's really, HTML file is designed for the browser. So remember the IP address that we use, right? Because a lot of these emails that comes for password reset, they wanted to make it believable. So it would contain IP address, right? Um, it would contain some kind of navigation. And typically, the majority of users would be using Chrome and Windows. That's why you have that there. But you can modify the code to be relevant to what they're using. It's not a hard fix there. And then the location. So if they click confirm your account, then it's going to take them to the URL that you specify in the app. So once you have this open, take a screenshot. So does the web page look real, right? This is also a subjective question, but let's think about like your general user. Can they take a look at this and realize that it's not real, right? Does it look close to the real thing? I know PayPal has changed the logo, right? The double P with the blue, they modified that. So the template might be dated there. So if you want, you can also, a good phisher would then go out and, clip that on their website, save it as an image, inlay that into the HTML code, definitely easier fix, or use another application that has more relevant template. So the takeaway in this is that the template that you are given in this application is going to be kind of close, but not exactly. But because technology company or companies, they realize that potentially there's fraudulent, or they modify their website and their logo and things like that. So um that person who's doing the phishing have to kind of follow up with, what they're pursuing. That's my point. Okay, so answer that question. Would someone look at that page, be able to put in their credential, right? So here, after that, what we can do is we're gonna close the browser. So you're gonna click the baby X, not the big X, inside here. That's gonna come back to your directory listing. And then you can come back to the terminal. Now to rerun the application, you can simply press the up arrow key 2 times or to the last command that you use, or you can type into the terminal or copy paste. And it's going to load the app again, right? So we finished setting up the template that we're going to inlay into our email. The next step is we're going to set up the email. So that's a process that you would need to really set up a phishing campaign for analysis. We would, set up the template and then use that template to circulate to the user. Now I believe that this account is disabled. I had previously created it to test, right? Just be careful about using real products like this. So in the case where if you do this for your company, ask for an email account, right? And name it to where it looks realistic, like HR or whatever, right? In this case, we want to make it look. So when I go through and set this up, I try to get some of the username, and a lot of them are taken, right? So you want to say, like for example, PayPal support, right? That's taken. So you have to kind of use something that's realistic, that's relevant to your project. And so we're gonna use this option, right? So once your application is loaded, you're going to input number 30. So that way you want to circulate the email. So you see option 30 right here. So we're going to type in 30. And so it tells you, okay, so now what you want to do is you want to go to prior emails that you created, or do you want to just start an email once just to send it to test, right? So we're going to do option 1 because this is our first time. And then you are going to input in the address that you're going to be using. So I'm going to just copy paste this. Now, if you do this outside, right, just keep in mind that, you have to set these accounts up. And then if you're using a service like Microsoft or whatever, sometimes in the business sense, you have to ask permissions because you can't just spam and send phishing email. So if we do it for an enterprise, you set up an account, talk to the technical IT team that manage email server, and they can do that for you, right? And they can enable the account for a period of time. So we don't want to violate policy. And then you are going to enter the password for this email account. So that way it will activate the send. So I just gave you the password here. Okay. And then the name that you want so people can see. Remember we talked about how you want the people to, this could be nickname in some email server. So it needs to be kind of close to the real thing. So we are gonna name it PayPal support team, or something related to that. And then now you are going to send it to the user. So you don't have to put in your real email here. I'm just going to use an arbitrary email because my YouTube video, right? So what you can do is you can test it. You can send it to your email to see if it works, or set up an account for the phishing campaign for your business and to test your user. So you can do that here. So I'm just going to put in like user@email.com or something like that, right? Not a real email address, but it would look something like that. And then the subject. So subject, remember the pretext that we talked about. The scenario has to be believable. So a lot of the times people don't access and enter the password unless the account is compromised, um, or something related to that. So we're going to put PayPal account compromise, right? We want urgency, so immediate action needed. Act now, right? Fix it now. So you want to encourage that action in the case of phishing. And then where do you want the file, right? The template, the look of your email, because it's gonna inlay that look so that when the user look at it, they say, oh, this is a real email, right? So we're gonna put in where our HTML file was stored, okay? When we set that up in the first part of this exercise. And now it's ready to go, right? So we set up the file, the template, right? And then we set up the account to send from and to. Now remember that this is a one-to-one, right? Can you have it where it's automated, right? You have to set up a list of account. So why is it throwing an error? What do you think? Two things are happening, right? The sender account and the receiving account. If the receiving account is arbitrary account, possibly it's not able to arrive to the destination. So the application is designed to check that. So it's raising an exception here. That means that it's halting, it's coming to an error because it's not able to connect to the email server, you see? So if you use real accounts, you won't have an error, right? We have an error because we have arbitrary accounts, especially the recipient, right? So that's why you're getting this error. So what kind of error is shown? So in Python, the error is it tells you, right? So that means that it's not able to circulate it to the server that's hosting the email accounts, right? So from the time that it sends to the time that it receives, it goes through many different servers. So if the servers are designed to receive, then you would get it. Question? Did I get you for attendance?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to double check. Thank you. Okay. All right. So take a screenshot of the error, and you know why the error is shown, right? Because your destination email could be, sometimes that could be your source email, the sender email, if it's blocking the email from being sent, um, and so on. You will get a traceback. And Python, that is an error. Okay. And we talked about why it's being prevented. Okay. Any question regarding part B? We're going to do social fish, and this is capitalizing on your social media type of account, very similar to what you've seen in the last one. This is also of open source phishing tools, so you're gonna start seeing similarity in a lot of these tools. So we're gonna come back to our terminal. And if you want to get out of this directory, which you should, right? What you can do is you can just type cd. I didn't put that step. Just cd and press enter. It's going to bring you back into your home directory. Okay. I always want to make sure I'm in the right folder, right? To start. So if you open another terminal, it's going to be like right here in the home directory. So you can also do that. Open another terminal or type cd. Now, next we are going to pull the code. So we are going to use Git to clone our code for our app. See you later. Thank you. And it's going to download and it's going to put it in, because I'm in the home directory, it's going to put it in the home directory. If you didn't do CD and you proceed, just keep in mind that it's in your fish mailer, right? Because if you need to navigate, you just got to make sure that you know which folder that you're accessing. Okay, so now, just like the other application, every application has its own folder, right? So once we downloaded it, we need to access the folder to run the app. And in this case, we also need to change access permission to execute the shell. Um, that's a requirement for this particular app. Not all of them has that. So I'm going to do a CD. And how do I know, right? Again, you can always do ls here, and it's going to show you, right? Social fish is it exists, and we're going to go ahead and access that folder or that directory. So CD social fish. And in Kali Linux, it bolded for you if it finds it in the current directory. Okay, so now we added it to our path. We're inside, we are accessing that folder or directory. And then it tells you that once you do that, you have to change. And this is Linux way of changing permission. If you want to execute, right, we want to run the shell of the application. So unlike having to, the other one, we had to run it directly from Python. This one, they wrote it so that way you can run it in shell. Python has a shell, and shell is a way that we can interact with the console of the app. So it really depends on like how they develop the app to be used, right? And you can find all of this in the documentation of Socialfish on their GitHub page. So once we change the permission, it's good to go. So if you don't run this, you're going to run into an error when you try to run it, because you have to execute it as a shell command. So, and can you run it as a source code or from source code as an application? You can. You just need to, if it's written in Python, then you have to run the Python file. But we wanted to run it in shell, so this is a way to learn on how to set up your permission and run it in shell. And shell is going to be your SH. Okay, so come here, and then typically when you run it in shell, you're going to have a dot slash, right? That is an indication that is a shell command, and it ends with the SH. So similar to the other one, you're gonna have options, and a lot of this is just, options for social media based app. So now let me scroll up. Once we ran that, we're gonna pick. So I'm gonna use Instagram, which is option 1. If you want to check out the others, you can try, right? But the lab is written for Instagram. So we're going to do 0, 1, and want to follow the number format that they give you in the menu. And it tells you that the default port is port 8080. So this is where you set up your port that will be tied to your phishing template. So I'm going to use 443, which is the common port for HTTPS. So 443. Now, if you use 8080, that's fine. You can just use 8080 in the URL. Okay. So it tells you that it is localhost 443. Remember that this app doesn't ask you for public IP address, not yet, right? So we are local hosting this particular application. So you're going to copy this and we want to test it. So copy selection, open up Firefox inside your VM, which is to the left of your terminal. And then we're going to paste in the URL. And those of you who know localhost, like it's really reference the loopback address for that particular part of the URL. And then the port, you can see that 443. So if you use 8080, it's going to follow. So localhost is the host name for that system where it reverts by to the loopback address there, right? And it loads the HTML, which is your landing page, right? So now, again, right? Compare this to a real Instagram login. Does it look like that? Have they changed, right? Is this template relevant? Those are the things that you ask, right? So if you build this for enterprise, you would create the template for the enterprise from scratch with HTML. But if you're using social media platform, you can go to a tool like this where it already has pre-created templates. So take a screenshot here that you are able to access the template. Does it look legitimate? Open up Instagram login page and see, right? Compare it. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna type in an arbitrary account. Test user, password. Now, take care. Thank you. So the tool is designed you to either loop back into the actual login again. So in a phishing link, you're gonna see the slow responding. We talked about that, right? Because it's not a real deal. Instagram, which is owned by Meta, they have thousands of servers, so it should be responding to these type of requests quickly. But in the phishing content, what you see is sometimes it doesn't go anywhere, right? The user would try to reload. Sometimes it goes to something that looks similar. So it's not really taking you to real Instagram because the account is not real. But this routes to Instagram and it will say error, whatever, right? So what happens to the credentials submitted? Well, it's not a real credential, so it's not able to validate the account. And now they probably use multi-factor authentication, so there's additional component in that. So um, I don't think it's going, yeah, so it's slow to load, but you will see that it's going to try to give you some options with the button there. Now, if you click login with the account, now, some of my students are like, well, if I make a fake account, can I test it? Well, you can go to that extent. That's really up to you to see if it actually validated. But you do see that it links it back to the real Instagram website. So real credential will take you there, right? And so here, if you type in, you know, test user again and click login, right? Password. Of course, it might be real. It's not a real account to us, then it should give you an error, right? But if you use a real account here, which typical user would, so the goal is to get the user to enter it the first time. And as you do that, it records it, right? The second time, who cares, right? That's all they want is they want that first attempt. And, error or not. Okay. So if the user and your typical user, if they can't log in maybe the first attempt, they'll try again, right? Oh, maybe I typed something wrong. They don't think about, oh, maybe whatever that I've used was not real. Okay. So think about that for question B. Then we're gonna close the browser. Now we're gonna look at the text file. So as you do this, you're gonna come back to the terminal. So your text file is saved under sites directory, right? Inside social fish folder. And it's buried into Instagram because that's the template that you chose. And it's called save.users.text. So this program automated to be saved here to output the credential there. Okay. So to answer question A for 42, you look at the path by of your file here. You can copy and paste that to your answer. Now you can open it up and see, right? It does show you as the input that. So it tells you in the plain text test user and password. Okay. Now it also tells you the IP address. This is a loopback address because we use our local system to test. But this is, let's say that you're using your laptop to access it. Um, Once you receive that email, it's going to record your public IP. Okay. So the IP that goes here is from the victim, that's the person that's entering the credential. And the user agent is typically the browser that they use. So the way that they code the HTML, you can simply do that. It's very easy to determine which browser the user use. So it shows that. So your user agent. And then if you look, your IP is saved under saveip.txt. So it organized your data for you. So in the case you need to go back and look, you look at the text file for what is recorded for the credential. We looked at that, usernames, and then the IP address is under the ip.txt. Okay. So now let's look at it. So you are going to open up the directory where it holds this file. Okay. So you're going to do cd sites slash Instagram, actually lowercase I there. Okay. They changed that over time, so I apologize for this. Let me fix that. Instagram, lowercase I. So if you copy and paste, be careful with step 43. If it throws an error, just check. How do I know? Well, look at the path that was in the previous step that they gave you. And then we're going to go into this directory. So add another slash, and it includes that into your path here. And we're going to read the file. This is how we read in the terminal. So we're going to do a cat and then the file name saved usernames.txt. It already showed you the information here, but if you have many names, right, then you can go into the text file and read it. And it organized it for you, right? Account, test user, and password. The first one is that is written with the application. So disregard this one. But the actual one that we enter when we use the template is this. So when your user put in, it's going to keep adding, it keeps appending to that file. Okay. Any question? Yeah. So when you're creating this phishing email, can it be sent to multiple at once? Yeah, but you have to also set up. So if you automate it where it would just send, they normally do it as a group. So they would have an email list and then they just use that file and in these type of, yeah, you can have it where you can write a script where it would go through the process for you and just fill out everything one by one, right? Or create a file of a bunch of email addresses and do it that way. So you can. Um, all those like login attempts will go as well. Yeah, it's gonna be under that text file. So it's gonna organize it that way. So from a realistic perspective, if you do a massive phishing campaign, a text file is not really ideal because I mean, if you have 10,000 user account, do you really want to go through 10,000 account, So there's some weakness in these type of program, and I'm sure that there's ways that you can populate that. So convert that text file into other file format is a simple process also in Linux. You can make that into a CSV file, or, populate that into a database file. So there's many ways that you can do this. So in a as an attacker, I will probably, small scale text file works, but in a large scale, which you typically see, they have to have a server, and so that's an added component to the app. Okay, so it should show your credential, right? That's what we put in. All right. So another option is to use it for the device. Mobile devices also change over time. So a good tool to use or a good option is going to be your lockfish. This is, how you lock your screen with a pin, right? Or you swipe your pin, your pattern, or whatever, and it it would encourage the user to to type in their pin or to swipe. That's the goal, is to get them to unlock, right? So you can capture that pin. um is this important? Well, if you have access to that system, the system security is sometimes it requires you to confirm the pin, right? So Lockfish is really, it's a logging credential in a different way. It's more of like a screen swipe or a pin number. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a curl command, and you learned that from the last lab, right? Curl simply is also a download, but it's just gonna reach out to the URL that you set up here. So this one we're gonna do the entire thing. Okay, I have it piped. So whenever you see the pipe, that means that we connect many commands together with the pipe. It's a separator. If you don't pipe, then you have to do one command at a time. Okay, so we're gonna pipe everything, and we are going to update while we're doing that. So if you install a bunch of apps throughout your project, just periodically update in the middle sometimes. But and then, because if you don't, some packages won't let you install, right? It wants specific things for the requirements. So we're gonna paste and then password. That way we don't have to run one command at a time. You can. So if you read, right, we're going to download, we're going to obtain the key ring, because this app require an additional requirement to use the API for keys. Um, and it uses GPG. Typically, this is an encryption package or protocol for email. And then it generates the key ring, And this is on, and the keyring exists, and as you can see, it's hosted. I just went over this with my other class last night. S3 is a bucket that is used for cloud, and this is an Amazon product. So people keep buckets to store things like keys, which you should protect. But anyway, um, they have buckets to store elements to their apps. Um, and you can find those things. And then you would go through and then you would access, the components that makes this application work. So you do sudo t, go through the directory, and you need to add, the list file, and then you're going to push update so that you can also connect command using a double ampersand, because everything comes back to C language, right? Command line, a lot of them are written as C. You see that the operators are similar to C or C++, which is a double ampersand sign. So if you don't use a pipe, you can use a double ampersand sign like that. Okay. All right, so once that's successful, we got everything, your ngrok set up, or your ngrok, right? That's the package. We are then, so it needs this, right? This software to run the actual app. How do I know this? Well, everything is documented on their page. Sometimes the documentation might leave out something, so you should research it. When I write these labs, sometimes I go down the rabbit hole because fixing something leads me to something else to fix, right? Because that gets tedious. But ultimately, it's definitely rewarding because, it encourages you to kind of troubleshoot some of these things. And not sometimes the documentation is not always up to date. They tend to be, but just keep that in mind. Oof. Let me see. Yep. It should clone fine. So you can copy the git command, and you'll be able to do that, right? So we're gonna pull the git. I had additional instruction, but application changes over time. So the last time I used it, I got rid of another command here. So you only need to download the Lockfish app. And to access it, it has a dashboard, it has a UI. So this is a nicer one where you actually could see things. So you're gonna copy this URL and open it in the browser of your Kali Linux, your Firefox. So in here, right, open up Firefox and then paste in that URL that you just copied. And so with this, right, we might not be able to finish this if you don't want to, so you have to test it using your smartphone or your tablet or whatever. If you don't want to, I'm not going to force you to, but I'm going to walk you through the steps to do that. If you watch some of my older video, I actually did this with the class. So if you have a smart device at home that you don't use, you want to use it for tests, you can. So you would use a smartphone or a tablet. You want to set up the password, and it uses multi-factor, hence the key, right, for multi-factor authentication. So that needs to be linked to an email account because that's how they verify. Um, and then you would need to, so use one of the password locker, basically. It's going to generate the QR code or the code, and then you need to validate that with the website for multi-factor authentication. And then it's going to give you the recovering rings, right? Once you do that, then you can copy the key and store it into a USB or another location. That's gonna be how you're gonna recover, right? The actual credential, and then it's going to take you to the page. Fill out the information and then connect. Okay. So you can skip this part, and if you don't want to do that, but if you do it, okay, it's going to take you to the authentication process. Now, after that, what do I do? I'm going to go ahead and access the application because I just installed it, right? So you can do step 53. So we can close this or minimize it. That's up to you. We're going to be back in terminal. Let's say that you go through the MFA process for the package for Lockfish. Then you're going to access, right? The directory, I forgot to come back. It's under Social Fish now, but Lockfish is here. And this is a shell file, so you're going to bash it. Okay, so instead of using the /, you can also use a bash command. I want to show you how you can run these programs different ways. .sh. And this is what it looks like, right? And so it's going to default to YouTube if you don't specify for the app, right? And so here, what you're going to do is you are going to put in the URL. So the localhost.4040, we can go HTTP localhost. Colon. And 4040 is the port that we're hosting for the interface of the app. And with that, it's going to generate some kind of URL which relates to the domain for that. So it's going to load the PHP server. It's going to start the nrock server, which is what you did to set it up, right? Now, we don't have a direct link because there's no real domain for that. But if you have added the domain information and set up the local system, you would get that there. Okay. So that way, so here, you're gonna open up. Let's see if that works. You can open up another terminal because you're running the app. Okay. And I'm going to get an error because number one, I didn't authenticate fully, right? I did not go through and set that up. So what you can do is if you test this, you would then use your tablet, set up this and see if that works. But as you go through the process, you're going to host it on your system that you configure. It's going to give you the URL, right? So you don't have to screenshot that if you don't have it. And then open up another terminal and you are going to run this. So what that will do is it's going to open up another port that's going to run the actual package for the application, right? And it will tell you the geolocation of the device, right? So if you run into error, you would there. And it tells you why, because authentication failed. If you don't set up authentication like I did, you won't have the complete process. But, I'm not going to require that because, some students they don't want to do that part. So it's okay. I understand. And then you also need to sign up for an account, right? We see that in this step. So it requires that you have to authenticate, you have to have an account, so that way you can access the data. So the URL that it's going to take you to, since this is an error, it's an error URL. Okay. So yes, on my part for the error, if you do the setup, it's going to tell you the location for the device. So when I tested this, it actually tells me like, where I am. So in some phishing campaign, they are required to use a smartphone, right? They might not have your phone number and things like that. A way to bypass that sometimes is they can SIM clone. That means that they can go to your service provider, buy another device, tell them that, they are you. So they impersonate you and they would say, can you please clone my SIM? A lot of the things we do is we service provider might not know if you don't report your phone stolen, which is not right. So if they don't verify the customer, then they would SIM clone. So this is why you should lock your SIM on your phone. A lot of the unlocked devices don't, it doesn't come like that in default for some part. But if you lock your SIM, you cannot insert another SIM typically. So when they SIM clone, they just take your phone information, which has your phone number and your account information, and tie it to another device. Then they can go through the MFA process where they can order a credit card, they can do other things with your account information. So that's the next level, right? Okay. So, in the completion of this lab, what did we learn? We learned that there are phishing template tools for you to set up. You need to, customize those templates to really match, right, your current type of web application that you're trying to get the user to access. And we have learned how to use. We'll come back to here, right? So in part A, you have, part B, you have fish mailer, and then you have social fish for part C. And then we also learn how to set up the mobile device phishing using Lockfish. And Lockfish requires a little bit more because it's actually, you know, related to the physical device to obtain access code for the physical device. And in some phishing campaign, you would require to do that, right? But anyway, so for example, if I'm managing, you know, types of mobile devices at work, like phone, tablets that I give to the user, I wanted to see if they how they manage the login for that. You can assess it by doing this. Um, but again, like I said, you have to go through and set up some of the authentication process so that way you can access the dashboard. And how can they be used? Well, we use phishing tool in the pen testing world to determine, whether we should train the user, how often we should train the user, what kind of information we should train the user on, like how to safely, you know, use or create password, how to not fall for phishing techniques, those type of things, right? So you do have to know about phishing tools in pen testing. Any question? Okay. I'm gonna stop recording. I'll be around until class ends. So I'll be here for class ends at 4:30, but I'm gonna be here until 5 o'clock until the other instructor comes in.